Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Saldina. I am a software engineer and I make programming and IT related videos here on YouTube. So if that is something that is of interest to you, consider subscribing to my channel. And this video is going to be all-in-one C++ full course for beginners. And the goal of this video is to take you from that place where you are struggling with programming, where you don't understand how to read code or write code, to a place where you feel really comfortable writing code and reading code and you really understand what the code is doing, because that is the most important part. So this course consists of lectures where I will teach you a specific concept, and then there will be a task, and by solving that task you will get a good understanding of that specific concept. And then the complexity of those tasks will gradually increase so that at the end of this video, if you finish it, you will have a very good understanding of the most important programming concepts, not only in C++, but you will be able to take that knowledge with you to other programming languages as well. And then at the end, after you finish this course, in the description I will leave directions for you on what should be your next step, because I have created a roadmap with steps and directions so that if you follow those, you will be able to build your programming knowledge to a very, very high level. But before we start, I want to ask you one question, and I feel extremely proud and happy that you decided to invest your time to learn programming, and I can personally give you many reasons why that is a great decision. But what I'm more interested in is, what are your reasons? Why would you like to learn programming and be good at it? Is it because you are a very creative person, or you want to get a job and earn a lot of money, or you want to gain those problem-solving skills, or because you think that programming is cool? So any other reason that you might have as well, please write that in the comments down below. And then make a public commitment before you start, because that is something that will motivate you. So write, I will learn programming because, and then put your reason and hold yourself accountable. So I am very much looking forward to reading your answer in the comments down below. So without further ado, I will just roll the intro and let's start with the video. Hi guys, very warm welcome to everyone watching this video, and this video is going to be Introduction to C++ Programming Language and the first video of this course. I was planning on dividing this video into two separate parts, so that in the first part I'm going to explain some basic concepts, some general concepts that are related to C++ and that you need to understand, in my opinion, first before starting to write code. And then in the second part we are going to build our first C++ program. So I'm going to include in the description of this video timestamps so that you can navigate yourself to the coding part if you want. But if you're an absolute beginner, I would recommend you to watch the entire video. Let's explain a couple of concepts before we actually start to write code so that you are familiar with them. You may wonder what kind of applications you can build with C++. Well, C++ is general purpose language. That means that it can be used to build all types of applications. So it is very close to the hardware, and that means that it can manipulate resources easily, so you can build operating systems if you want with it. You can build compilers, browsers, demanding games. So all general purpose software can be built with C++. It is not specific for only one domain, but it can be used to solve and build different types of applications. After that, I would like to mention that C++ is compiled language. That means that the code that you write first has to be compiled or converted, translated into another language that is understandable to your machine, to your computer. So that phase is called compiling code or building code. There are certain errors that can occur in this phase, of course, and those are compile time errors. This type of errors is usually the most common among beginners, among people who are just starting to learn C++, and we are going to demonstrate some of those compile time errors when we start coding. After that, C++ is case-sensitive language. That means that C++ distinguishes between lowercase and uppercase letters. So if you have, for example, a variable all uppercase and then a variable all lowercase, so the same meaning, the same word, those two are going to be treated and understood differently as different variables by C++. So it is case-sensitive language. Why C++ was created? Another question. Because before it there were other programming languages. Well, yes, they were. And it was created in 1980s. And it was created with two programming languages in mind. One of those two was Simula, and the other one was C. So Simula at the time was great language for human way of understanding and representing things. So it was very understandable and easy to use to humans. But at the same time, it was very, very slow. So they decided to combine it with another programming language, a fast one. And at that time, the best choice for that was C programming language. So they combined the two and they got C++. C++ is very, very understandable language, very easy to use by humans. So you can build and maintain huge projects with C++. But at the same time, because of this C part, it is very close to the hardware, so demanding tasks can be executed fast. And also, well, since it was created from C programming language, you can say that any valid C program is actually valid C++ program. So if you've ever built a C program, you have actually built a C++ program already. As I have already said, the code that you write is not directly understandable to your machine. So first, it has to be converted into another language that is understandable to your computer. But the language that is understandable to you is called source code. I am going to put here an example of source code, and I'm also wondering at this moment, what do you think that this code does? So before we started any programming, any coding at all, what do you think that the result of this program is going to be? So just to check how understandable C++ really is, even for someone who has not have a lot of experience in coding. So write in the comments of the video what you think that this code is going to do, and I'm going to check those. So at the same time, you're going to be doing something called writing pseudocode, which means describing what a program does, but just in plain English, so no C++. So this is the source code. After that, that source code is transferred or translated into another form, another language which is understandable to your computer, and that is object code. That object code is usually in the form of binary numbers, so ones and zeros. And that is the only language that your computer actually understands. And this is an example of your machine language. I'm also not going to ask anyone to describe what this here does, because this is highly unreadable and cannot be understood by humans. But as I said, it is the only language that your machine understands. So algorithm, what is algorithm? Algorithm is nothing more than a recipe. So steps, instructions that you write to your computer, list of ingredients and steps that your computer needs to do in order to perform a certain task, that's algorithm. Now that we have understood these concepts, let's switch to more practical part. So the tool that we are going to use is called Visual Studio 2019, and there is a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how you can download and install the Visual Studio, and you can also use community version for free. So when we open Visual Studio, you can see that here in this left part we have our recent projects. So the project that I have recently created, and this may be empty if you haven't used your Visual Studio. So on the other side there is a menu with multiple options. You have the option to check out your code from GitHub here. You can open existing project from your computer and continue working on that. But the option that we are going to use is called Create New Project. So we are going to click that. So this new window now here appears, and we are going to define what kind of project we want. As beginners, we are going to build a very simple app. So we are going to build a C++ console application. So you can type in C++ and make sure to select C++ console application. So not C#, not Visual Basic, but C++. And when you clicked it, you can now when you selected it, you can now click Next. So this new window now, we get a new window where we have to define our project name, location where our project is going to be saved, and our solution name. As default, our solution is named the same as our project. What solution is just actually a group of projects. So if you had a huge application and you wanted to divide it in smaller parts so that it is easier to maintain, you could divide it in multiple projects, but all of those projects would be part of the same solution. So since we are building a simple app, we have only one project and we will name it My First App. So my first app. And location for our project, we can either enter manually or we can do it by clicking this button here. And I want my files to be saved on desktop, so I'm going to select desktop. And now we are done with creating our project, so with configuring our project, so we can click create. So the tool that we are going to use, Visual Studio, is an IDE, or Integrated Development Environment. That means that it has a lot more options than just those that we as beginners are going to need and use. So for now, I'm going to explain only the most basic ones, the ones that we are going to need as beginners. But as we progress along the way, I'm going to explain the new features that we'll use. So the first thing that you can see here is our Solution Explorer. So if you cannot see your Solution Explorer, you can click here to this view and select Solution Explorer, and that should bring your Solution Explorer back to view. So as we said, our Solution Explorer is named My First App, and it has one project inside it. So this project is this one here. And as you can see, when we created our project, it was created with some default folders and files. For now, we are going to use only one file, so you can delete these folders, header files and resource files if you want. Just right click and click delete. So now this source files folder is where we are going to put our source code files. If you remember from before, I have said that source code is the code that we write and that is understandable to us. So this is our source code file. So this with .cpp extension. So when we created our project, this file was created by default. And if you double click it, it opens here. So this part here is nothing more than a text editor. Really, as any text editor, it just has these different colors depending on the purpose or the role of the code, so that you can manage the code easier. If it were all the same color, it would be harder to read. So for example, this green part here is a comment. Comment is just a note for yourself. So compiler will not try to translate commented lines. So if you type, for example, here this // or that means actually begin comment, and then you can explain, for example, what this preceding code does. So you can write, this will output to the console hello world. So this will output to the console hello world, so that when you, for example, come tomorrow to this code and you have forgotten what this code here does, this will remind you, this comment here. And these are some default comments, which I will delete now. We are not going to need this. So just select everything and click delete as you would in any regular text editor. This part here also. Now let's explain what we got here. So this include IOStream is actually a header file, so it is also called a library. And this IOStream is input-output stream, so it allows us to input and output data to and from our program. For example, thanks to this, we can use commands such as this here, so cout or console output. So without having this, we would actually have to program ourselves how we will input and output data in our console. So we will not delete this line here. Now check this code here. It says main. Well, that means that this is our main function. So a main procedure that our program is going to execute. So whatever you put actually in these braces here, your program will execute. And the execution of your program begins here and it ends here. So since this here is the scope of your main function, so you can collapse it by clicking here, and you see that everything is collapsed now. So for now, it's enough for you to know that this is our main method, our main procedure. And later in this course, we are going to learn and understand what methods are used for, what is their purpose, and we are also going to create a lot of our own methods. So now we have this cout or console output, which is the command to output to the console. And then we have it also combined with this std and these redirection signs. So std is the namespace for this cout. So that's how your computer knows what this cout really is. I will show you later how you can get rid of this if you really want. And we also have this hello world in quotation marks. Okay, let's see what we have learned so far. We said that this is our solution. Inside it has one project, and within that project we have this file with extension .cpp, which is our source code. So if we double click this file, it brings us here, so to this text editor. And this is our program. This is the code of our program. Now, how we can run this code? Well, see this green play button here? Well, that's our start button. It's really intuitive. So if I click it, we will get our hello world text here, which I have outputted to the console. And you can also see that we have, besides our hello world, we have gotten some junk text here. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can get rid of this in a moment. So let's close our program for a moment. And what you need to do in order to get rid of this junk text is type this command here. So system pause greater than 0 in quotation marks, and the end of command. You notice that at the end of each command, you have to put this semicolon. And if you didn't, it would result in a compiler error, and I will demonstrate that. Let's run our program now, and you will see that our junk text has disappeared. So as I said, after each command, you have to put this semicolon, and if you didn't do that, it would create a syntactic error, and then your compiler would not be able to understand, and your program would not run. Actually, your program would not start. So if I delete this semicolon here, you see that something has changed in this window here. So you see this error red sign. Well, if I hover over it, you see it here, also here. It says expected a semicolon, which is very clearly says that you are missing a semicolon. And if you see this red underline here, it says also expected a semicolon. So before this, you are missing a semicolon here. So if I add it here, our error will disappear. So if you try to run your program before fixing this error, it would prompt you with a window like this. So it says you have 1 failed project and 0 succeeded projects. So this is the code building that I have mentioned before. So this one project, which is actually the only project that we have, has failed building. So your compiler does not actually understand what you have written since you're missing a semicolon. So another thing how you could know that you have syntax error except from this prompt window that we got is this syntax error, so missing semicolon before this closed brace. And if you click it here, it will take you right where you need to go to fix your error. So it's very useful. And if I press my play button again, it now says hello world. So I will stop the program now. You can do it either by clicking this red sign here which says stop debugging, or you can click this X on the console window. So if some other error has happened to you, which didn't happen to me here, you can write that in the comments down below and I will gladly help you. Also, someone else can help you from the other people learning from this video, and I would highly encourage that, since in my opinion the best way to learn something is to try to reproduce what you've learned and to explain it to someone else. So write in the comments if you got some other error. Now let's see how we can upgrade our program. So let's write something else. Let's add, for example, std to column size console out. So under quotation marks I will put something that I want to write out. So let's say, for example, my name is Saldina. You can put your name, of course. And at the end of each command, you put semicolon. And let's add one more. So let's say today is Friday. And also add end of command here. So it should write, when we run our program, it should write these sentences in this order here. So you can run your program. And if you can notice, it has this new line in the first sentence. So this is because of this \n. So that puts whatever text is coming after in a new line. So you can put that text in a new line by either entering a \n or with adding this std end line. So std end line, and I have previously stopped my program. If I run it again, you see that we have gotten a new line here. You see also that this std here is becoming a bit tedious to write again and again. And I've told you that I'm going to show you how you can get rid of this. So what you can do is you can put this std on a global level. So you can say using namespace std, and what will that do is reference this std namespace on a global level, so you don't have to reference it every time that you are using it. And now we can delete all of these. So wherever you have written std, that's going to be referenced here now, and you don't need to write it separately. And if we run our program here, we are going to get our result. So we have also this new line added by either /n or this end line here. Okay, so in this video we have learned how we can output data in a console, and in the next video we are going to see how we can input data into our console. So we can ask user to input data, and we are also going to talk about variables and data types. another thing that I want to show you before I finish this video is, you may be wondering, okay, do I have to start Visual Studio every time that I want to run my program? Is there any other way for me to execute my program? The answer is no, you don't have to start Visual Studio every time. There is another way to start your program from Windows. So let's save all changes that we have made here so far. So you can press Ctrl+S, or if you have made any changes, you see this star here. So it is indicating that you have unsaved changes. So you can right click on that and click Save. And you see that that star disappears now. So let's find a folder where we have created our project. For me, that was desktop. If you followed this tutorial from the beginning, you created it also, and if you followed me, you created it also on desktop. So you can open your folder. You can go to debug, and inside that you see this file here. It says application. So this is your program. So if you right click on that and you check its properties, you will see that it says .exe. That means that it is executable file. So that is your program, that is your application. And if you double click on that, well, you see that it runs same as in Visual Studio. So you can start your program from Windows. Actually, if you want to show it to your friends or someone else, you don't have to open Visual Studio each time that you want to run your program. But one more thing to keep in mind is that if I go to Visual Studio now and I add one more line, let's say we write out "Have a nice day." So, and if I save it, so Ctrl+S, and if I try to open my program from Windows now, what you'll see now is that this new line that I have just added is missing. But why is that so? Well, if you remember, when we were talking about building code, we said that that's the phase of converting source code that you have written into a code that your machine understands. And when you start your code from Visual Studio, it does that process automatically for you. So it builds your code and then it executes your program. But when you are starting your program from Windows, it is missing that phase of building code. So your recent changes, your last changes were not translated. So your computer has the only translated version that it has is the previous one. So without your recently added changes, what you need to do is you either have to run your code from Visual Studio first, or it's enough for you just to build that code inside Visual Studio. And what happens when you do that, so just click here and you can click build, and what happens is your Visual Studio translates this code that you have written and it saves it here. And now when you run it and when your Windows runs it, it has the latest version, it has the latest changes. So this is the small trick that I wanted to show you. So this would be all for this video, and if you came across to some errors that didn't happen here to me, or you have any questions, you can write those in the comments and I will answer those. And if you watched so far, you can like this video, you can subscribe and share it with someone else who would also like to learn programming, and I will see you in the next video. Hi guys, I hope you are all well and welcome to the second video of C++ for beginners. In this video we are going to talk about variables, data types, and also I'm going to explain how you can enter data in your program and how that data is encoded into numbers using something called ASCII table. So here I have opened Visual Studio, and if you are not familiar with Visual Studio, or there is some code that you see here but you don't understand it, I would recommend you to watch my first video of this course. The link is going to be in the description of this video, and then come back to this video. So let's talk about variables now. What is variable? Well, I like to explain it through a real life example. For example, you see this glass here. Well, what I can say about this glass is that it is a container for a certain type of liquid. So it can hold water, milk, tea, juice, whatever you want really. And the same way, a variable is a container, but for a certain data type. So you can put whole number inside it, you can put character or a decimal point number or a Boolean value meaning true or false value. So they are the same in this aspect. Another thing that I can say about this glass is that it defines a maximum amount of liquid that it can hold. So it has a max limit. And if you put too much, it will overflow. The same way with variables. Variables also define a maximum amount of data that they can hold. For example, if you have a whole number variable, well, there is a max number limit for that variable that it can hold. And also, if you put too much, it is going to overflow. It is literally called data type overflow. So it is a container, the same as variable, and also it defines a maximum amount of data that it can hold. But how much data you really put inside that variable? So the same way with the water inside this glass, if you decide to put 1/3 or 1/2 or 2/3 of this glass, the same way is with variables. You can put however much you want as long as you don't put too much, because then it's going to overflow. One thing that is different though between variables and this glass is that you can put one day inside this glass you can put water, the next day you can put juice, the next day you can put milk, then tea, or even you can mix two liquids. But with variables you cannot do that, at least not with ones in C++. There are certain languages that you can do that with, and there is also advantages and disadvantages when it comes to that, but in C++ you cannot put two different data types inside one variable, and you can also not change a data type of variables once you create it. So let me show you what I'm talking about on a practical example. Let's say that you want to create a variable that is going to hold your annual salary. Well, that variable is definitely going to be a decimal point number, or also floating point number. That's how it's called in C++. And the type that is used for that is called float. So I'm going to say float. And then I'm going to give a name to that variable. Since we said that it's going to hold an annual salary, we are going to call it annual salary. Okay. And then we are going to assign it a value, and that value is going to be, let's say, 50,000.99. So now what I have done here is I have created a variable called annual salary. I have said that that variable is going to be of type floating point number, and then I have put inside that variable 50,000.99. So now let's see how we can, based on this variable, based on our annual salary, calculate how much our user is earning every month. So what we are going to do is we are going to create another variable. We are going to call it monthly salary, and we are going to assign that variable a result of dividing this annual salary with 12 months. So we are creating a variable of type float also, since the result of division usually can be also floating point number or decimal number, and because of that we are using also float type for our monthly salary variable. So I'm creating monthly salary variable, and I'm going to say that that variable is going to hold result of this expression, annual salary divided by 12 months. And now we have a result of this division inside this variable, and what we are left to do is to write that result out to our user. So I'm going to say cout, since that's the command that we use to output data to console, and I'm going to say your monthly salary is, and I'm going to say monthly salary. So one thing to notice here is that when you are writing out strings, or when you're writing out data like this, you use quotation marks. But when you want to write out the value that you are holding inside a variable, well, then you just put the name of your variable. You don't use any quotation marks then. And now we can run our program, and let's see what's the result that we got. You see here your monthly salary is 4,166.75. So if you want to check that out, you can calculate it in your calculator. One thing that that bothers me in this program is that we have hard-coded this value here. So we have hard-coded this 50,000.99. Not everyone's salary is 50,000.99. And what if we wanted our user to enter what his salary is during the execution of our program? So when he runs our program should ask him, what is your annual salary? And then he enters that salary, and then we calculate his monthly salary based on the number that he has entered. So I would like to upgrade this program now to work like I just explained. And how we are going to do that? Well, first I'm going to delete these 50,000.99. Okay. And then we are left with this situation here. So it says float annual salary. That means that I have just created a variable called annual salary, and I have said I'm going to put a floating point number inside that variable, but I have not assigned any value to it yet. So here we have a container for our annual salary, and that container doesn't hold any value. And if we try to run our program now, what do you think that we are going to get? Write that in the comments before I run this program. And now I'm going to, so pause the video and think about it, and then write your answer in the comments. And now I'm going to run the program, and you can see that we have some build errors, as this here, this window here says. So let's see. If we open this part here, it says we have one error, and that error is uninitialized local variable annual salary used. What that means is that this expression here, if you see this green underline, it also says using uninitialized memory annual salary. Well, that means that this expression here, our computer doesn't know how to do this expression, since we haven't assigned any value to our annual salary variable. So it doesn't know how to divide that with 12, since there is no value inside that container, inside that variable. So this causes a compiler error, and whoever has written that compiler error is going to occur, he was right. So what we have to do to correct this is we have to ask our user to enter his annual salary. So what we are going to do now is, let's see first. The command that we use to output data from our program into our console is cout, so console output. And the command that we use to input data is console input, or cin. So I'm going to say cin, and then we use these other redirection signs, and then we say what is the variable that we want to store what our user has entered, and I'm going to say annual salary. So what I have said here is our user is going to console input the data, and then whatever he has inputted, you have to redirect that inside our annual salary variable. So now, if I run my program now, you see that our program runs now, so there is no compile time error. And also our cursor is blinking. Well, it is blinking because it expects here our user to enter annual salary. But this is not really clear to someone who has not made this program. So what we have to do, if I enter some value now, well, it is going to calculate it correctly, but this is not really user-friendly. So what we have to do is we have to write a message to our user before he enters anything so that he knows what he should enter. So before this cin command, I'm going to say cout, and I'm going to say, please enter your annual salary. Okay. And now, if I run my program, you are going to see, please enter your annual salary, and the cursor is blinking, waiting for you to enter the value. And if I say, for example, 40,000, you see that your monthly salary is 33333. So the program has calculated your monthly salary, and the number is based on whatever our user decides to input. So we have upgraded our program. And there is also one more thing that I would like to show you when we are doing this example, and that is, let's say that we want to calculate how much money our user is going to earn in 10 years. So let's say cout, in 10 years you will earn, and now we have to put a value of how much money he is going to earn. And if you look at this situation here, we first created our monthly salary variable, and we then assigned it a value of annual salary divided by 12. But there is another way that we can write out results of expressions without creating any variables, if that is what we need. And that is just here. So in this line, in 10 years you will earn, you add these redirection signs, and then you say expression that you want your computer to calculate. And what we want to calculate is how much our user is going to earn in 10 years. So that is annual salary times 10. And if you do it this way, so if you don't decide to create a variable, then you will not be able to use result of this expression later in your program. So you don't have a container that holds this 10-year salary, but you have a container that holds annual salary and monthly salary. So each time that you want to write out or do something with your 10-year salary, you will have to write this expression, while if you want to do something with your monthly salary, you have a container that is holding that value directly for you and you can access it. So if we run our program now, you see it expects us to enter our annual salary, let's say 50,000. And you see here your monthly salary is 4,166.67, and then in 10 years you will earn, what is this, 500,000. So okay, one thing that we are missing here and that you can add is end line or \n. So you can add it here, and your program is going to format your text nicely. So this line should go here like this. If I add here one more end line, and if I run my program again, you see enter 50,000, and now we have our text formatted nicely because of this end line that I have just added. Let's now create another variable, and this time we are going to create a variable of type character. So char, that is the type that is used for character variables in C++, it's called char, and let's name our variable character. And when you want to assign a value to a character variable in C++, what you use is these single quotes, like this. If you see this example here, when we are writing out text, so string of text, we use these double quotation marks. But when we want to assign a character value of a character variable, we use these single quotations, like here. And there are also some more rules when it comes to naming your variables. And the most important one, in my opinion, and the most important one to make it easier to you, is to name your variables according to their purpose. So give meaningful names to your variables. That is really, really important. For example, you see this monthly salary variable here. We could have as well named this variable blah, 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 and copy it here also, because we are having compiler error right now, because our compiler does not know what this variable really is. You see, it says identifier is undefined because you have not created this variable here, because it supposes that it is a variable, but it has not been created before, so it does not recognize what this variable is. So we have to copy the new name here also, and now our compile time error disappears. And this here, this name, does not represent anything to your computer. So your computer is now going to run your program, and your program is going to work just the same as it did before. But this is really making it hard for you to understand what your code is doing. And especially if you come to this, for example, in 10 days, or someone else tries to understand your program, this is really hard to read. And he will just try to uncover really what your program is doing without understanding it, because you have used these blah 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 names for your variables. The same situation would be if you, for example, have 3 boxes inside your kitchen, and you use one for storing sugar and flour and salt. And instead of naming those sugar, flour, salt, respectively, you decide to name them red box, green box, and blue box. And then someone else comes to your house, someone else comes to your program, he does not really know where to find sugar, because red does not mean that that box is storing sugar. So you should name that box sugar box, because imagine 3 is easy to remember, but imagine having 10 boxes or 10 variables or 100 of them, or even 1,000, which is very common inside large programs. So what you should do, and I am going to do, is return that previous name. So monthly salary, and here also. So you should give meaningful names to your variables. That is very important. And that is the first rule. The second rule is that, well, the second and third and the fourth are the rules that you will have to obey in most cases, because if you don't, then you are just going to get a compile time error in 99% of the cases, let's say. And I'm not going to say what that 1% is, because I want you to obey these rules. So when it comes to naming your variables, another thing is that your variable names cannot contain any special characters except underscore. So like this. This here is valid name to your variable. But if you try, for example, to name your variable like this, so you say plus character, you see that here in this error window it says expected an identifier. So you cannot use this to name your variable. Or this, you cannot say character with this minus inside it, so character minus ter. So these signs, these special signs, are used for something else. They are operators inside C++. And you are not supposed to use those inside your variable names. If you really want to use some special signs, what you should and can use is underscore, like this. So this is the only sign that is allowed and that I recommend for you to use for naming your variables. That's the second rule. The third rule is that your variable names cannot begin with numbers, like this. So you cannot say 8 character, for example. It also says expected an identifier. But what you can do is you can say, for example, character 8. That is a valid name. So a number can be on any other position except on the first position. So this is a valid name for a variable. So you can put also number here. So you can say, for example, C12 character 8. But again, what does that really mean? That is not a meaningful name for a variable. So again, we come to the first rule. So you should name your variables according to their purpose. So I'm going to return this to character name again. And then we have our third rule, I guess, which is you cannot use space inside your variable names. So for example, this is not valid, and your compiler says it here. So it gives you an error. It does not know what this really is. So you cannot use blank spaces inside your variable names, because you are going to get a compile time error. And if I try to do that and I try to run my program, I get the window. So it says, you cannot run this program. You have syntactic errors. What you should do is you should correct those errors, and then you can really run your program like this. Okay. So let's repeat these rules one more time. The first rule is that you should give meaningful names to your variables. So name them according to their purpose. The second rule is that your variables cannot contain any special characters except underscore. The third rule is that your variables cannot start with numbers. You can put number on any other position, but not on the first one. And the third rule is that, and the fourth rule actually, is that your variables cannot contain blank spaces. So empty spaces, no in a variable name. What you should do is you should name your variables according to their purpose, so meaningfully, and you should also use something called camel casing. What is camel casing? You see how I have named this annual salary here. You see that the first letter of my variable name is small letter, and then the next word starts with capital letter, and that is called camel casing. So for example, you would name your variable like this: first, second, third. So like this. You see that this first, second, third, these are words inside your variable name, and this F is lowercase letter, that's the start letter of your variable, and then each next word begins with capital letter, and all the rest is lowercase letters. That is called camel casing, and that is something that is usually used with C++. Let's talk about data types now. I am going to delete this code, so if you need this code for a bit longer, you can pause the video here. So, what kind of data can we store in our variables? Well, for now we are going to cover only the most basic ones, the ones that we are going to use frequently, and you should know that there are a lot more data types besides from these that we are going to mention here, and more complex ones that we are going to cover later in these videos, in this tutorial. So the first one that I would like to mention is a whole number data type. So integer, a data type that can hold negative whole numbers, 0, and positive whole numbers. So the type that is used for that in C++ is called int. And good example for int variable is, let's say, year of birth. So that is an example of a whole number variable. And let's say that that variable is going to hold 1995. Okay, so that would be an integer variable. After that, we have already seen this. So it is a character variable. So let's say char. And an example of a char variable could be gender, for example. Let's call it gender. And you can store F for female or M for male, for example. So the char variable can store one character. Then the next one is Boolean value, meaning true or false value. This is the simplest one, and the type that is used to store Boolean is called bool. And a good example for a bool value could be, for example, if you want to hold in your program a variable that tells you whether your user is older or younger than 18 years old. So let's call our variable is older than 18. And we can assign to that variable either value of true or false. So I'm going to put true. true here. Another variable, another data type is decimal point number, also called floating point number, which we have mentioned before. And let's create a variable of type float. And let's say that that variable is going to hold our average grade. So average grade. And this average grade can also be a whole number, but since it has potential to be also floating point number or a decimal point number, we are going to use a float data type for this average grade. And another data type that I would like to mention for also storing decimal numbers is called double, and the difference between double and float is that double is double size of float. So if you remember when we talked previously about taking memory space that variables take, so float is taking 4 bytes and double is taking double of that, so 8 bytes. So you can put much more data inside your double data type than inside float. And let's say, for example, that if you had a credit card and you had a lot of money, a lot of money, and you want to store that value inside a variable, you would use a double data type. So let's say double balance equals to this large number here, which I'm not going to even try to read. Okay. So these are the most common data types that we are going to use in this tutorial. I have said earlier that each data type takes a certain space in memory, but let's see exactly how much each of these take. For that, we are going to use something called size of operator, and let's see how we use it. So cout size of int is, and then we write this size of. So size of, and in parentheses we pass to it data type that we want to check how much memory it is using. So int. And if I run my program now, you see that it says that int takes 4 bytes of memory. And if you've ever actually studied binary algebra, you would know that 4 bytes of memory is actually 32 bits, since each byte has 8 bits. And as we said, our int can store both positive and negative numbers, and 0 also, remember that. So the first of these 32 bits is used to determine whether the number has plus sign or minus sign, so whether it's a positive or a negative number, and then remaining 31 bits are used for this value itself. So let's check what is min value for our int. Let's write that out. Let's write cout int min value is, and we have a reserved word for minimal amount for int in C++, and that is int underscore min. And if I run my program now, you see that it says this minus 2 billion, extremely hard to read this number, but you see that this is the minimal amount of int. So this number is actually 2 to the power of 31. Let's just quickly write these. So minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, and then minus this number here. So this number, as I said, is 2 to the power of 31. Why not 32? Because this 1 byte is used to represent this minus prefix. Now we should check a positive number range. So we also can write int max value is, and then there is another keyword in C++ for int max, which is int underscore max. And are you expecting to see this same interval but just with plus sign? So write in the comments, what are you expecting to see? And if I run my program, you see that that did not happen. And if some of you know why it did not happen, I would also like to hear what you think, why we have this number here and then this number here for our negative and for our positive range. So different ending number. And I'm going to explain why. Because this positive range here, we have to include 0 also. So in order to include one number here, let's just copy this and paste it. So our positive range is going to from 1 up to, let's say that it is this number, but since it is including 0 also, in order to include one number here, so 0, you have to take one number here. So this here is not 8 anymore, but is 7. So that is why we got, let's say, different number for our positive and negative range, because this here includes 0 also. One thing that I have to mention though is that if you want to use only positive integer numbers, there is a data type for that as well. And the data type that is used for that is called unsigned int.